I call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, January 23rd, 2025. All managers are present. And are there members of the public? No. So is there a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Manager Hitchmati. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I failed to note, but I will change the order of 12, 13 and 14 before 12. Our information items are the surety return project and the FEMA repayment summary. And on the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes of the January 9th board meeting and approval of the 3 check registers for general checking, surety checking, wire transfer, and 1 resolution, 25011, which is authorization to renew the Metro Watershed Partners membership. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Manager Hitchmati, I'll take a second for Manager Maxwell. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I have no report this evening. Manager Maxwell, can you give us the CAC meeting report?
It was last Wednesday. It was a very good meeting with we had 4 new members. They were all really knowledgeable and really had some good backgrounds that I think would really be beneficial for us to really listen to them down the line. They were all good, nice, good group of people that really have, I think, the same goals. So one was we talked about the initiation engagement for the 2000 watershed districts, about the 4 steps, the rollout activities, the individual partnerships, and the kickoff publications and kickoff events and advisory committee meetings. And then we congratulated Mr. Whisker on his Administrator of the Year, and that went really well. And I mean, he just talked about all his accomplishments he did for the watershed district over the years, and all the different partnerships that we formed, and it was good. So it was a very good meeting and good attendance, and some good 4 new people are really good.
Thank you.
And they had elections too, but I didn't, the name wise, I just, they're all good people.
Can't lose, right? Manager Loftus, the Minnesota Watersheds Metro meeting, please.
Yes, that was earlier this week, and both Bill and Sherry were also there. The presenter was the mosquito control. They had an interesting take, as they always do, on what their role is and what they're able to accomplish for our regional area. Our President White was voted president again for that organization.
Hard
Yes,
fought.
bravo.
I have no competition.
Yes.
I asked for it.
Yeah. And then, maybe I don't recall this from the other times I've observed, but there were updates from other state agencies like Bowser and state agencies, and it seems to me that this organization's a good opportunity for, the different watersheds throughout the state to stay connected and make sure the overlap or there's some coordination. There were good questions about how as a watershed can we help with stormwater ponds not attracting mosquito larvae and whatnot. So I think it's one of those organizations that connects and makes sure there isn't too much overlap without forethought or thoughtful questions. So it seemed worthwhile. So thanks for inviting me. Although we were very, very well represented. There were 3 of us there.
Yeah.
So
I found it very interesting. I learned an awful lot from that presentation
about mosquitoes.
about mosquitoes, yeah.
We have 9 deadly diseases that they're controlling, and there's different mosquitoes for the different diseases. And he talked about Dr. Fauci getting West Nile virus. He talked about equine encephalitis and lacrosse encephalitis, and these are all available in Minnesota now. So it behooves us to make sure that we don't let anything like that get out of control.
And we have a lot of open water, so that's just who we are, and that's where mosquitoes like to be.
Well, they said that larvae could live in the cap of a pop bottle, I think, or something like that.
Yep.
Oh, exciting. The upcoming meetings, which are just our committee and board meetings, are listed in the agenda. We have no permits or public hearings, so we'll go to item 11.1, Ms. Neal presenting on Resolution 2512.
one?
We'll go green. Right bottom underneath. Bottom underneath, sorry, yep.
Here, you can use this one.
Oh, thank you.
I'll take the fiddly one.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening.
This is a territory.
All right, we're done joking.
Okay. It helps me since this is my first board presentation. Good evening, President White and Board of Managers. Tonight I am before you for item 11.1, requesting the board to direct a public hearing to consider ordering the Morningside Stormwater Improvement Project located within the city of Medina. In terms of flow tonight, I'll start by providing an overview of the project, timeline, and some of the key milestones so far. I'll then briefly review the designs presented at the December Policy and Planning Committee meeting and walk through the city's current proposal. Then I'll discuss staff's review process for the project in terms of both permitting and LWP review and how that informs our current funding recommendation to the board. I'll then wrap up with next steps for the project before requesting the board to direct a public hearing to consider ordering the project. At that time, I will be happy to take any questions that you have. And Dusty Fink with the City of Medina is also in the audience tonight, and he may be able to help answer any questions that you might have for the city as well. The project site is located in the Painter Creek subwatershed in the northwest part of the district. This subwatershed is one of the district's focal geographies and is a priority for water quality improvements. The site is just north of the border with Orono, but is fully within the city of Medina. It first drains to a wetland and then flows west to Lake Katrina and then south through Painter Marsh before ultimately discharging to Jennings Bay, which is impaired. The project site involves two privately owned parcels, 1245 and 1225 Maplewood Drive. The city had been looking for a way to treat about 76 acres of mostly untreated runoff that drains to the site. And at the same time, the landowner at 1225 has also been looking to subdivide into 3 lots. There are 3 ravines in total that drain the site. The main channel is currently already partially piped, as you can see there outlined in orange. And then all 3 of the ravines are currently eroding and contribute additional nutrients to Lake Katrina and downstream Jennings Bay. When the city proposed this project in 2022, the district helped the city initially receive state funding. The district serves as the grant administrator for the Board of Water and Soil Resources watershed-based implementation funding, and we operate a convene process where we coordinate with partners in the watershed to identify project opportunities for funding through the state grant. We worked with Medina as a part of this process to secure them $243,200 of WBIF for the project. The city initially planned to pay for the project solely through WBIF and city funds, and the city originally committed $100,000 to the project during concept development, but increased their commitment to $180,000 during feasibility for a total of 30.3 pounds of treatment. With funding secured, the city completed their feasibility study in 2023 and then re-engaged the district this past summer when they kicked off design. And as they worked through the design process, the city identified a cost increase needed for an open channel design, which they have applied for LWP funding to support. And in order to begin construction in 2025, the city needs to conduct tree removal before the end of March. So we have been working with the city to help them identify the right design for the site and move the project forward within an expedited time frame. So next we'll look at the proposals for the site. In their first permit application, the city proposed to place 2 of the 3 ravines in pipes, marked by the orange lines on the screen, in order to address erosion and runoff given the steep slopes and highly erodible soils on site. They proposed to stabilize the northwest tributary as an open channel using bioengineering techniques. The district's water body crossings and structures rule is specifically designed to prevent placing streams in pipes. We require applicants to assess the viability of alternative designs and give preference to the minimal impact design. In addition, the proposed subdivision requires demonstration of 2 feet of freeboard to be approved for a stormwater permit. And so based on a site visit in coordination with the city to assess alternatives, the district determined that it would be feasible to maintain open channels for all 3 ravines, and we coordinated with the city to develop a new open channel proposal. Based on those conversations, the city submitted a preliminary alternative design in early December that we reviewed with the board during the December PPC meeting. The design proposed then to maintain an existing an existing pooling area at the outlet of the existing storm sewer in the middle channel and use step pools reinforced by sheet piling down to the stormwater pond. So I can use the laser pointer feature here. This is sort of the existing storm sewer, and they propose to maintain this existing pooling area, and then here's the sheet piling and step pools down to the main pond. And at this stage, the city still proposed to place the eastern tributary in a pipe. The use of sheet piling increased the total cost of the project to $692,000. Based on this estimate, the district anticipated the request for LWP funding to be closer to $208,000 in order to cover the initial $100,000 cost increase that we saw in October, as well as the addition of $108,000 in new construction costs. And the board's feedback on this design focused on identifying the best design for the site, a project that would be effective and sustainable in the long term and keep all three channels open. And then the board also indicated potential willingness to consider additional funding above the initial $100,000 request, but with work to dial in costs, assess the need for sheet piling, and really reduce costs where possible to focus on the elements necessary for the best design. And so the board's feedback informed our message with the city, and we have since worked with the city to further develop a new design that keeps all three channels open and dials in the use of sheet piling. So then on December 30th, the city submitted a new proposal that maintains all three ravines as open channels and provides finer detail on the use of sheet piling. In addition, the pond outlet structure for the existing pond is now extended underneath the access road before outletting into the eastern tributary as an open channel, and that outlet structure is right here. So now I'll talk through our staff's review process for this new design. As a reminder, the goals of the LWP program are to increase early coordination and integration of land use and water planning, to leverage opportunities created through land use change to improve water resources, to provide service and value to communities, and to support our focus and flexibility principles. As part of establishing an orderly process for LWP review and incorporating projects into our capital improvement plan, we've set up annual deadlines on February 1st and April 1st each year to request support with feasibility and implementation, respectively. However, the program is also designed to be flexible and responsive to opportunities that arise throughout the watershed, so we also offer partners the option to expedite the process based on project needs. And given that the city only recently realized that they would need additional funding, that the city has been really receptive and open to our design recommendations, and given the scale of potential benefits, we have been willing to review the project within this more expedited timeframe so that the city can begin tree removal in March and construction in 2025. And in order to do this, we have been reviewing the city's submittals for permitting and LWP needs simultaneously. So before considering the project for funding, we wanted to make sure that the project could meet permitting requirements. Our permitting team, along with the district engineer, have reviewed this most recent proposal and determined that while our stormwater management and water body crossings and structures rules are still triggered by the subdivision and the extension of the pond outlet structure under the road, there are relatively simple updates that can be made as a part of final design revisions in order to achieve compliance with both rules. So they're almost there. In addition, LWP staff have also reviewed and vetted our recommendation through an internal core team and the district engineer. After refining our recommendation based on this review process, we discussed our perspective and confirmed next steps with the city. The city's updated estimates provide 21.5 pounds of phosphorus removal each year from the ravine stabilization and 14.6 pounds each year for the stormwater pond, for a project total of 36.1 pounds. The subdivision is required to treat 5.3 pounds, so that leaves 30.8 pounds as extra regional treatment. The district engineer has reviewed the proposed treatment and confirmed that the estimates are reasonable and the cost benefit for the project would be about $1,149 per pound, which is slightly more than the estimate we projected during the December PPC meeting, but still well within the Stantec recommended range for phosphorus removal. And we anticipated at the December PPC that the city's updated LWP request would come in closer to $208,000 based on the changes to construction costs. However, in their new design, the project total increased slightly to $708,000, and the city's actual request was for $280,000. This higher number was driven primarily by the incorporation of additional sheet piling, which accounted for $170,000 of construction costs, as well as the request for LWP to support covering some of the indirect costs associated with the project. While the district engineer has confirmed that these costs are reasonable for that design, they have also advised that the project could succeed with a lower level of sheet piling and therefore a lower level of overall costs. And so as part of the LWP program evaluation process, we use criteria to help guide staff and board. This scoring is not intended to be a set equation. It's simply a guide to inform our decision making. And so we look at water resource priority, benefits, effectiveness, and partnership to help guide funding recommendations. The Morningside project scores highly for water resource priority given the benefit to Jennings Bay, which is one of our focal geographies. It also provides high water quality benefits given the 30.8 pounds of proposed regional treatment. For comparison, the Calvary Church and Maple Creek projects propose to provide about 5 pounds and 19 pounds respectively. And among our capital projects, the Arden Park restoration provides 30 pounds of treatment each year, and the East Auburn Stormwater Pond retrofits provide about 25 pounds of treatment. For project effectiveness, even with increases in cost, this project still has a good cost benefit. And while the project has come in outside of our normal timeline for review and really has been a bit of a scramble these past few months, the city has been receptive and collaborative with us to work through some pretty significant design modifications. So overall, the project aligns well with many of the criteria we look for in LWP projects. Based on our internal vetting process, the district engineer's review, and the board's feedback, we also discussed our perspective with the city around costs and the need for sheet piling. The city does think they can bring down costs further with additional design revisions and a reduction in sheet piling. However, given their timeline constraints with tree removal, they indicated that they were comfortable with us moving forward with the funding cap while they decide whether they want to come up with additional funding for more sheet piling as they finalize the design. Therefore, staff recommend providing a funding cap of up to $200,000, which equals approximately 28% of project costs. This amount does not cover the full cost of sheet piling that the city has requested or their current estimate for indirect costs, but this level of partial funding provides enough support for an effective project with long-term sustainability. Therefore, the district is comfortable moving forward with this funding cap while the city continues to sort of value engineer their design and make final revisions. And today, the city submitted a new plan set and cost estimate that looks like they've cut down on sheet piling quite a bit in order to manage costs more in line with our recommended funding level. So if the board moves forward with directing a public hearing tonight, the district will prepare to hold a public hearing to consider ordering the project at the February 13th board meeting while the city finalizes their design in the meantime. District staff will also request the board consider ordering the project and amending the 2025 budget to provide $200,000 in funding at the same meeting. In the meantime, we will work with legal counsel in the city to draft a funding agreement that will outline the terms of LWP funding and prepare to request the board's approval of this agreement at the February 27th meeting. Therefore, staff, with input from district legal counsel, are requesting under Resolution 25012 that the board direct the administrator to notice a public hearing to consider ordering the Morningside Stormwater Improvement Project.
Thank you.
Thank
Is
you.
there a motion to, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say thank you.
Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? I think, did you move? Is there a second? Second, Manager Olson. Questions for Ms. Neal? Yes.
The initial request was for 280. I don't want to just give away money, but on this, but want to make sure that we provide enough to, make it a classy project, whatever that might mean, with sheet, with the sheeting. But so how do you rationalize cutting the budget and satisfying the need for a high quality project?
Yeah, so in reviewing the project with our district engineer, they did advise that some sheet piling was probably justified at the outlet where there's sort of the outlet of the pipe, there's this existing pooling area, and where there's that first check dam, and so there is some sheet piling that is justifiable according to the district engineer, and so we thought $200,000 and putting a cap there would allow us to fund some sheet piling, but not all. and also allow us to fund some of the indirect costs that the city was requesting to cover, but again, not all. And then providing that cap would allow the city to sort of work with their engineer to sort of value engineer the design further down,
Okay,
meet that number.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Manager Loftus?
For some reason on the website, when I try and scroll down, I can get down like 3 or 4 pages and then it boops me. Yeah, that. So I apologize, I couldn't get to your technical memo. So I just was looking for kind of a layman's explanation of, and I got part of it, so thank you. The sheet piling, what the additional sheet piling does it just serve as like an elevation change mechanism, or what is it, just in simple terms, what does it accomplish? And is it kind of a tried and tested method, or are there other ways with natural slope that people typically do it?
Manager Loftus, manager, so the extra sheet piling was probably more of a nice to have as far as security as the water coming down. The first set is just as the water comes out of the pipe, that's where the most force, so you think about just like a hose or something against the wall.
Yeah.
That's
So
where it
it's
is.
Keeping
And-
erosion, it's preventing erosion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then once it falls off there, we felt very confident that it could just be managed with the natural slope to be able to go through. So that's
Okay.
what, that first one just helps going in there because the pipe does come in very steep as it comes in there and the velocity's really fast. So we just want to ensure
Sure.
city's comfortable, Dusty and his team are comfortable moving that forward, and then as it moved down, that was
Yeah.
kind of the lane is real.
And no longer riprap sheet piling is more what? Is it just
Sheet
more?
piling just for that first one, so
Okay.
it'll be lined with riprap around it, and
Okay.
then downstream, it's just a series of riprap pools.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I don't know why that happens, and it happens to other people, I think, looking at the website too. It just
Huh.
only goes a few pages and then you get,
It says webpage crashed.
yeah, but every time, so I don't know what the deal is.
Did you have a
I'm
question?
sure your memo explained all that, so I apologize for asking again.
No,
Manager Sender?
that was clarified. I was gonna have explanation on sheet piling, so it's all clarified. Thank you.
Manager Hijmati?
Yeah, a couple of things first. I want to thank you for coming to the meeting, and I really appreciate how we've been able to work together cooperatively on this and make it happen. You know, our working together between the cities and us is what's going to help all of us make the world a better place for our children and grandchildren. So thank you for doing that and being here today. So that's one thing. The second thing I wanted to ask you was, you gave a comparison of the different projects that have, and said these are, 30 pounds, 25 pounds, so on. This looks like a fairly small project, and I may be wrong in that, but it seems to have a very high level of phosphorus, which then raises a question in my mind, where is that phosphorus coming from, and what's going on upstream that's causing so much phosphorus? And is that something we need to pay attention to, if not with this project? I mean, this project is fine, I have no problem with this project, but I'm looking ahead and saying, is there someplace else that we need to look at in terms of improvement? And maybe you're not the right person to answer that, but I'm just raising that question, because that's a huge amount of phosphorus being produced for such a small project. So
Yeah,
what would you say?
Managers, the development that feeds into this main pipe that comes in was built before a lot of our regulations came into place. So the fact that phosphorus is coming in, it's a large untreated area that's currently being gone through the pipe there. And so by doing this, it's helping kind of grab that phosphorus before it discharges. So it's one of those, and the development is fully built out. It was built in the 80s or so. So there isn't a lot of room to be able to grab that stormwater before it gets to the resource. So the fact we're able to collaborate with the city to be able to hold this together is a great opportunity to come in and essentially.
So really, the source of the phosphorus is something that is from stuff that happened years ago, when there's really very little we can go up and do anything about. So we're using this as a way to manage that.
Yeah, Manager Hajmati, it's very similar to what we're doing at 325 Lake. It's a fully built out situation, and we're looking at ways to be creative and be able to grab that phosphorus
Right.
when we have a regional treatment solution. So much like 325 Lake, this is really trying to look at
A similar kind of project. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yes.
How many trees are getting removed, and do we replace the landscaping then? Maybe the gentleman. Probably a strange question.
Yeah.
That's come up for anything recorded. President, members, I don't have that number, but it is a significant amount of trees we're moving. And it's really only in the disturbance area where we're gonna be constructing the pond, so opportunities to replace in that location are gonna be somewhat limited. We will replace as many as we can. But yeah, unfortunately, at the bottom of the ravines, it is a wooded area, so there will be a fair amount of tree removal, which when you notice your public hearing might be one of the things that you'll hear from
Yeah,
anyone
about the
that
tree removal,
shows
yeah.
up at the hearing.
So when you take the trees, do you just cut them off, or you take the roots, do you dig out all of it, or just leave the, you know, down to the roots and leave that go naturally, or? do you-
There's a significant amount of grading in order to accommodate the stormwater pond, so, I mean, it will end up being
They'll come
cleared
off.
from the site.
Roots and all.
Yeah, roots and all.
Correct.
Yeah, there'll be, I'm sure there'll be some people talking about the tree removal and how it's gonna look so bare and everything else, and I just wondered if you, the kind of landscaping you put back to replace it, or?
Yeah, so we've, in communications with the property owners, have said we will do what's possible, but there is a stormwater pond, so the footprint obviously is limiting. We're not gonna remove more outside of that footprint than we have to, so there's not a lot of opportunity.
Build up the perimeters so they cannot see what they didn't wanna see,
Yeah.
what was gone.
Yeah, and we're leaving along the edges again as best as we can, but it's gonna be a significant change in the environment
Yeah,
there.
the looks and everything else.
Yeah.
All right.
These
thank
are
you.
undeveloped, this is undeveloped, right, or unsubdivided yet? So it's a bigger
Uh,
parcel?
So the subject properties are actually like small rural lots, I guess I would, a couple acres each. So it's not like wide open spaces. It will be visible. So it is essentially in sort of the backyards of several homes. So we've been trying to make contact with the owners and hopefully head that off from your hearing, and we can take that heat in those conversations, hopefully before that comes. But, I think we think it's a good project, and there's not a lot of opportunities to do something of this scale in this subwatershed in Medina. I mean, it is a good project. And I'd like to thank you all for your support, and your staff. It has been a meandering path to get to this point. We were actually started, ironically, in a different subwatershed, looking for some ravine stabilization. And we were able to work with the new watershed-based funding, go around with Becky's leadership, which I've appreciated. You talk about mosquitoes. She and I have spent a lot of time walking ravines and swatting mosquitoes.
Oh, man.
Rebecca comes on board and hopefully helps push us across. So thank you for all of your service. And I work with planning commissioners and city council members and all the effort that you all put into this. We've enjoyed working with your staff, and I think this is a great partnership. And you asked about the funding. I think it is a Medina project, so, when you talked about bringing the 280 down, we went back to the council and made sure that we had support to up our funding as part of this as well. So we're at a 200 split, I guess you can kind of in round numbers, plus the watershed-based funding for, I think, a great project. So appreciate your support. And we still have to bid the thing, so that's our best estimate. And I think the city acknowledges there's maybe some more risk of an increased cost when bids come in, and so we're hoping to see where that ends up.
Thank you very much for the information. Manager Esmati.
Do you expect, in a public hearing, you know your community better than we do, do you expect any opposition?
President, board members, we're going to try to get out there. We have had some conversations, and as mentioned in the report, this is the property owner is looking at also subdividing the property.
Yes.
I believe the opposition relates more to the potential subdivision of the property than this project.
Okay.
But I think there's the perception or reality that they are related. And so that's what we're trying to get ahead of.
Would prevention of this project stop or halt the subdivision?
I don't believe that the subdivision could go forward without this
Without the
project. The ravines need to be stabilized, so, I mean, there is, that project, I think, has to be addressed one way or the other. What we would end up with, and the largest impact of the tree removals is really the pond, which has more of that regional benefit, and really doesn't, I mean, the subdivision would have to serve some sort of stormwater management if they went forward, but the footprint would be much smaller.
Right, the 5 pounds.
Yeah, so it'd be a much, it'd be a smaller rain garden or something much less significant. It's a 50-acre untreated drainage area, so, which is where we get those benefits from.
Manager Miller?
What's your title?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dusty Finke, Planning Director of Medina.
Okay. I've been on this board for nearly 3 decades. It's the most compliments we ever got for giving away money.
Dusty, you can come back next week.
Yeah. No, I mean, I sat on the, I forget what we were called when we were going through and sort of started talking about the land and water partnership. And I sat in this room for a series of meetings with other staff, and I think a lot of those comments, hopefully some more will come and say nice things. So I think this came out of that collaboration, again, led by your staff and your direction. So I'm hoping that'll continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations on a very successful first presentation.
Thank you.
President White,
Thank you.
Board Manager.
Thank you for coming. Item 13 is board inquiries, issues, and ideas. Are there any contributions this evening? Manager Jumati?
Yes, my question would be, we haven't talked for a long time about DEI and what's happening with that, so I'd be interested in being updated on that.
Okay,
Oh, I guess I have one too then.
all right.
Twofer.
I know, so exciting. We're paying the city of Richfield a bond payment, which we do regularly, but just curious how the compliance of that project is shaken out as well. I know a while ago there were some things that were being worked on, but
We'll take those in order, and if
you
it's,
don't have to answer it right now.
yeah, I was going to say, if it's okay with the board, we'll bring back a more thorough update at the next meeting on our diversity, equity, inclusion programming and some of the progress that we've made. I can work with Becky on that. And then maybe serendipitously, I think we've got one of our annual meetings coming up with the Tech Legion project with the city of Richfield next week. So we're programmed to get a progress report on the diagnostic and troubleshooting work that they've been doing with BAR to get that. They've fine-tuned the operations to a point where they've squeezed every last drop of performance out of the project, and we briefed the board previously on some of the basis of design challenges with that project. And what we're hoping to hear, and what we've really been pressing for the last 12 months, is for BAR's watershed modeling and diagnostic work to identify a cure, a retrofit, an additional project that actually delivers, that's a reasonable investment for the city to make, that actually delivers the agreed upon return on investment. And so we'll see where we land on that, and then we'll report back to the board.
Thank you. Okay, your report.
Okay, President White, managers, let's see, I've got boardwalk, campus improvements, some Minneapolis updates. I wanted to brief the board on some work that raised some concerns from neighbors in City of Tonka Bay, and then a few staffing updates. So for the Tonka Bay work, I have a few slides, so I'll kind of shift screens here mid-presentation and bring those up. I think I've kept the information flowing over the last probably 5 or 6 meetings about how things are progressing with regards to the Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk. Reported at the last meeting, I think it was January 9th, on some of the initial findings from the field test where JTS jacked sections up. They implemented the repairs and what we observed on site. And I had mentioned that we would be meeting after the January 9th meeting at City Hall with the contractor and the building officials to debrief and figure out where we stood. So that happened last Monday, January 13th. We did debrief on the field test. A lot of the feedback that I've already shared with the board was put in the middle. that the jacking operations that JTS used did create some issues and stresses on the system. We think that those could have been alleviated if they'd have adhered more tightly to the jacking plan, which called for beams to go underneath all of the joists and lift things evenly versus independent jacks moving different corners at different elevations. So need to see some adjustments before those methods are going to be really streamlined in the field. We're also going to need them to put together sort of a mitigation plan, or if they have tear out, if there's rubbing or friction on those joists and they get a piece of the timber that peels off, what is their plan? Are they going to replace those timbers, those joists? That's our position. It's the city's position, and it's a reasonable position since these are their methods that they're proposing. So those are the challenges. I think the good news was the parts themselves performed really well, and the city was quite happy with that portion of the field test. So there's this joist extension bracket where the joist is, where there's gaps greater than 5/8 of an inch, but smaller than 1 1/4 between the header and the joist. They've got a custom part to put 6 through bolts on a steel collar that goes on the end of the joist to seat properly in the hangers. They put that on, it performed very well. And then some of the steel shims, of which the city and I think we want very limited use of, those performed quite well too. So in debrief, the city confirmed that after SRF integrates those parts into the contract documents through a change order, that the city would approve them as alternatives to building code, which is this sort of long odyssey that we've been on, is are they acceptable alternatives to the building code, which gives us a pathway forward for what the contractors actually proposed, which is great. Next steps is we are beginning to draft that change order in coordination with legal. We're drafting some recommendations for JTS to consider integrating into their implementation plan. We're very interested to understand what's their timeline, where are they going to start, how big is their crew, how fast would they move through the boardwalk in kind of a ripple effect implementing these fixes. And of course, obviously after the change order is approved, then the city would approve the alternatives. I think after that happens, we've predicted, and I would continue to anticipate, that the contractor, JTS, is going to want to take stock of the finances. They're going to be looking at the outstanding payment for the project, which I think is around $300,000, the accumulated liquidated damages, which are around $100 a day from the contract completion date, and then what it's going to cost them to buy all these parts and implement, and they're going to want to sit down and talk about the numbers. So that's the update there. I'm curious to hear from the board. I've asked at previous milestones, would you like a more detailed presentation? Are you feeling like you're kept informed? Because the next steps are going to be moving the change order forward and getting the alternatives approved by the city. And then, like I said, I think we'll be sitting down with the contractor and they're going to want to talk dollars and cents. And then whatever comes of that conversation will form a decision point for all of us.
Comments?
I've lost interest in the project since I can't smoke cigars anymore. So.
Huh.
So you don't want us to?
I'm not supposed to smoke them. So.
I have a couple of.
But this project, it seems like it's got more lives than anything else we ever worked on. How confident are you that the contractor can perform?
Well, I think there's two questions there. There's confidence in the contractor and confidence in the alternatives. And I think the alternatives that they put forth aren't, our first preference as an organization. We would have preferred the contractor to build it in accordance with plan and spec. That would have been better for us. I think watching the parts be implemented in the field, looking at the structural modeling that the parts manufacturer put together and SRS review it, and actually just seeing how those are implemented, got a lot of confidence that it's a really robust system and it's not going to negatively impact the longevity of the project. And that's been a concern, is if they're doing something different, we want it to last the full life cycle. I think based on the field test and how they approach the initial build and how they approach the field test, we explained to the contractor at debrief, like like we have concerns about how their crew is going to actually implement this work. City building officials brought that up too. I think essentially that until they build and level of momentum that everybody has trust in, it's going to require an awful lot of hand-holding, like through every single section, eyes on every single section, through the uncovering, the documentation of fixes, the sign-off of the fixes. So I think that there are some confidence issues in, you know, the contractor's abilities. I'd mentioned, I think in debrief, the custom part that they had Mitech, the bracket manufacturer, make. They originally put it on, the first test, they put it on upside down.
Oh, no.
And I'm not a boardwalk builder, but me noticing that in the field is kind of the problem.
Manager Hajmati and then Manager Loftus.
Okay. And a couple of things. The first one is sort of piggybacking off what Dick was saying, is, you know, we've been on such a long road on this with so much stuff that is happening, that do you think that are we close to reaching the end point, or do you anticipate that we will still have difficulties? And that could mean a variety of things, like, you know, the contractor may not have the capability, you know, they may not be able to do it, you know, all of that. So looking ahead and wondering what the feasibility, you know, how feasible is it that we are close to being done? And you know, you may need to do more to answer that question. I understand you may not be able to answer it now, but that's one of the questions I had. The second question I had was to look at this whole project. This has been ongoing for a long time, particularly with the financial part of this, to look at this whole project, for us to look at this whole project from a financial perspective, you know, from a treasurer's perspective, look at this and see how we got into this and where we are, and is there something we could have done differently at various points in time, you know, with the next, like in the next time we do it, we want to do this before we do that, you know, sort of looking at it and looking at the feasibility of all the things that we've done, and determine the points where we probably should have evaluated or said something different.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Kind of a 20/20 hindsight, looking back and saying what could we have done different that we can incorporate in the future when we have things happening. I'd be interested in seeing that. I'd be interested in.
We've built some incredibly strong, successful boardwalks since then.
Okay.
We've learned,
Okay.
and what we've been producing lately has been very good.
Has been good. Okay. All right. Jessica, what do you think of that? I'm curious as a treasurer.
Well, I think we had some specifications which fit our needs, and then we followed a pretty standardized bidding process, and, you know, went with a contractor who provided a cost that they submitted, and other companies submitted as well. And then I don't believe there was any reason at the time of awarding that to think they wouldn't do the project as they said they would. I don't think we had any reason to believe that. You know, if we found out maybe that this was a pattern for them and we didn't do our due diligence, background, you know, red flags on them as a company maybe, but otherwise I think it's just a tragic.
Just a tragic set of
It's tragic that
circumstances.
they just didn't build what they were paid to build, unfortunately, and I'm not super interested in them letting us know how it's impacted them. I'd rather be prepared for letting them know how it's impacted us, both consulting costs, time-wise from our staff, and honestly, the loss for the public use of this facility. It's been delayed how long, hence the $100 a day, I know. But I think that's really important that the company understands, A, we need it built right because the public uses this. We trusted and paid you to know your industry. It's sad that we have to babysit it this closely. It should be just here's your payment, build what you're known to build. But I think James has worked hard to try and get us through the situation.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the concept of, you can always learn something, so I'm sure there's something to learn from it, and also, I hope there's a running tally of all of our
There is.
costs.
Yes,
James?
yes.
I got a quick one. Are you done, Jess?
Yeah.
Do we have pictures of the new brackets that they put in?
Yeah.
And so I realize St. Louis Parks said they're happy with it. Is our engineer happy with it too, and how they look and fill the gap and everything else that we were talking about?
Yes, Manager Maxwell. So our engineer is not Chris on this project. It's SRF is the design firm that we used. And so Casey Black's the design principal. I mean, from what I understand, I think that this is drawn because of how long it's gone on. And we haven't been, SRF's holding billing, so they're tallying their own bills, and we haven't paid them for all this ongoing work. Due to some of the construction oversight, I mean, we were paying them for construction oversight on this project, which is one of the lessons learned and insurance policies that we have, that it is going to be built right, we have plans and specs and construction oversight. And so their leadership's really leaned in through this process. And over the last year, what we've been working on, honestly, maybe speaking plainly for a minute, is dragging the contractor through what is your plan? Because our preference is we build it properly, plan and spec. So is the city's. So either do that or tell us what the plan is. And they, throwing alternatives around, we needed those brackets to the structural design of the structural modeling of those and design of those and the review of those to come from the bracket manufacturer through an orderly process, be reviewed by SRF as the design engineer, document their review of the modeling to structural load tolerances, international building code, document through the defective work list that we have, the 11 categories there, that they're conditionally approving those on paper. The field test was then the culmination of all of that review and documentation to see how do these perform in the field, which is both a test of materials and methods, the parts, as well as how are you going to get the parts into these places through the jacking operations. So our engineers have been building confidence over the last year through the paper review, and then the field test was really the culmination. That package got submitted to the city as a request for alternatives to building code. And so there's a formal application process. And then SRF, the contractor, me, the building officials meet in the field and we watch the implementation of it, and that was sort of the final step. So our engineers are comfortable with the alternatives. I think we all have outstanding questions about the contractor's methods and their implementation. And they seem more likely to want to go out there and just do it. And that's what got them into the trouble in the first place, rather than like following a well-orchestrated plan that forecasts what some of the challenges are and then has, backup plans. So our engineer is comfortable with the parts.
All right, as long as the engineer, if they ever looked at it, we looked at it and everything else, because if he cut corners one time, he's gonna cut corners next time. I mean,
And that
there's not much
process,
difference. One, if you've got a contractor that's gonna cut a corner, he's gonna continue to cut corners, because now he's X amount of dollars in the hole, or whatever the case may be.
and
Just
that
for he doesn't-
process has been, tightly managed since I got involved between staff, legal, and engineering. So it's not, right and left hand know exactly what's happening. So we're making sure that we're following the contract review process. And so Casey Black with SRF, Chuck Holtman, myself, Mike spent an awful lot of time on the phone.
And once they're done with it, again, St. Louis Park still has to sign off on it.
St. Louis Park will be there 2 to 4 times a day if the contractor opts to move forward
Yeah.
for initial uncovering. We diagnose, we're going to have a set inspection form for how we document every joist and what the existing conditions are. That drives what the fixes are. Then they implement the fixes, and then the building code, the district, and SRF are going through and reviewing those. And so that part of it's going to be fairly labor intensive.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to St. Louis Park for,
Yeah, they've been incredible.
Yes.
They really have. I mean, I think early on there was some, concern over them pushing back on the alternatives, but they're just doing their job
Yes.
incredibly well.
Yes.
Which,
Yeah.
as I've gotten
Yes.
involved, I think we've really, really appreciated. And we've built a good, strong bond with Chief Building Official and all his staff. So I think we're seeing eye to eye, and they have just been incredibly helpful. Two of the questions, there was one about feasibility of completion. You said I could come back to that, so I'm going to. I think we've talked about, there are gonna be some challenges, there's gonna be some weather challenges. This work is gonna want to be done in the winter because the jacking, the timbers, under frozen versus heated conditions is gonna change expansion and ease of jacking operations. So that's an immediate concern because the contractor's really kind of taken a long time to get through the approvals process, and it's January. So in terms of how quickly, which was one of your questions, I think that's a key factor. And then feasibility is contractor willingness and capability. And so there are risk points. The key has been we've been getting up to the approval gate. We go through that and then we decide what's next. In terms of looking at the whole project in sort of a post-action debrief, that was actually, I think the board passed a resolution on that. Manager Miller introduced that probably a year ago. It seems to make sense to do the post-action debrief, post-action, and we're still in the action. So there are a lot of learnings. I think one of them is, how the district chooses to exercise, how it follows low bid and what it can do with the constraints of low bid. So for example, what are the types of questions that we can ask to determine responsive bids, low qualified bids? Whether it's questions about crew, past projects, are we hiring sort of like general laborers or are these carpenters? I'm not quite sure what kind of questions. Otherwise, there's other bid processes that come with some challenges and some risk that we have used before. I think we used for Cottageville Park a best value procurement, where it's a combination of, capabilities and cost. I think construction oversight's a real lesson learned. Staff's role, the consultant's role. We did pay SRF to make sure it was built to plan and spec and watch the contractor, and that hasn't happened. I don't know that there's much. There's some learnings there about who, when you get a private engineering proposal, what the staff team looks like that's doing the oversight, what's their expertise and capability, and I think on our team, there's what levels of training and expertise our team have to kind of supplement the paid help that we're having for construction oversight and more and more. So we are keeping a log, and I think we're ready as we go through this process to debrief with the board and outline through the contracting and oversight process how we're deploying those changes so that we run into less issues. It's not about boardwalks, right? Bill had mentioned, well, we built better boardwalks. It's about how we do construction. Anytime you do a plan and you put it out with specifications for construction, there's a chance it doesn't get built right. And so to me, it's more about that. And as the scale and complexity of our project goes up, that's more and more of a risk. So we want to tighten up that part of the process for sure. Is that close enough for today?
Yes.
Okay. A few other updates. Campus improvement planning. I've been continuing to advance the due diligence related to how we're going to resolve this cross easement with our neighbors to the west, Campbell CV. We've met with our other neighbors to the east, the Webbers, who own the nursery or the florist next door. They don't have any interest in the easement legally. I also don't think they have any just interest in it, but they're amenable to access during construction. They remain open to that. We talked about potential lease for parking spaces. I think they're open to that and they support it, but they're also leasing spaces to New Horizons Academy further to the east, which is underparked. And I think generally doing the math, I think that actually have challenges giving a lease for parking, even though they're very receptive to it. We then met with New Horizons Academy's in-house counsel, Jill Dunkley, Chuck and I, just last week. I learned a lot, which is always fun when you're working with partners. They're the largest family-owned, non-franchised childcare in the United States. Didn't know that. And we explained to her the cross easement references Tract B from the time of the original subdivision, which is New Horizons. And the easement's so poorly drafted, again, New Horizons really doesn't have any interests drafted into the easement, but it could be construed that they have obligations, which makes no sense because they're not really using it. And there's a separate easement that preserves their right to access over there. So there's this weird fiddly language in this poorly drafted cross easement with Campbell CV that if we pursue our legal authority to resolve that cross easement and rewrite it, they would be brought in. And so we wanted to meet with Jill and ask, if we do decide to do that, are you going to step out to avoid extra complication? They seem pretty open to that. They don't want to be in the fray, and so we're routing some of those documents. They're running up the internal flagpole. So next steps, I'm going to put together a course analysis that we talked about as a lesser project for campus, which would be not a full reconstruct into the subgrade, but a reclaim, and the permitting and cost requirements. So meanwhile, I think in February, we're probably ready at this point, since we've done all the easement due diligence, to bring a letter in front of the board that would go to Campbell CV on board's consideration to outline the options that we have as a unit of government to revise that easement and hopefully encourage them back to the negotiating table. Obviously, then we'll see if their position softens, and then we'll be able to make a decision on, are we moving forward with a lesser project that avoids those complications, or are we pursuing a legal avenue for revising the cross easement, whatever that might look like. So little update there. I'm going to skip over Minneapolis because we spent so much time on the boardwalk, and I think a lot of folks are generally tracking. But maybe it was last week, maybe it was this week, they all are blending together. We were at the Hiawatha master plan or schematic design open house that was quite well attended with park commissioners. I'm not sure if I saw a council member there or not. Broad cross-section of both golfers and general public, all the boards for the different design. And so that project continues to move forward. I think we were monitoring the comments and the dot exercises that were being put on, and seemingly just over time, more and more momentum being built for pivoting away from a full 18 towards a 9-hole course. There seems to be more and more support for that, and that's obviously anecdotal. They're crunching all the feedback that they got from that meeting. So more to come on that. And then I'm going to finish with '60 Crabapple Lane. So I pulled up these slides here to brief the board on some concerns that we've received regarding work in the floodplain on Lake Minnetonka at 60 Crabapple Lane. The steps that our staff's already taken, which have led our team to conclude this matter has been resolved. It doesn't require any additional expenditure of resources, but also frame the outstanding concerns of neighbors who recently, within the last month, mailed a letter to President White that we're actively responding to, and then just tee up the next steps that we're going to take after the meeting. So this is where 60 Crabapple Lane is located. It's in Tonka Bay. I think that's east of Manitou Road. I don't know why this is so slow. And some background here, I think in August of '24, the neighbors raised some concern with permitting staff about some floodplain fill. And they came in on the 29th of August and met with our team to detail those concerns. Which precipitated a site visit and inspection by our permitting staff on September 5th. And really concerns relate to this landscaping berm that was put in the yard with these trees on. So that's what the picture is here. We did the site inspection. I think those neighbors were present to that site inspection. Then we spent about 60 days trying to get a hold of the owners of Crabapple via mail and phone. And in November, I think our permitting staff realized that the house was listed for sale, so they actually reached out and contacted the realtor. The realtor bridged that connection. The owners then put us in touch with their landscapers. And ultimately, the landscapers came out and they removed about 8 cubic yards of mulch. Staff conducted a site visit, took some pictures, documented. Then in December 5th, about a week later, they sent the inspection report and notes and pictures out to the city and the neighbors who had some concern, and essentially said that the matter had been resolved. Then at mid-December, we got this letter to President White from neighbors and essentially stating they don't feel it's been resolved and they're concerned and they want more action on the part of the district. They've also reached out to the city of Tonka Bay, which has the very similar floodplain ordinance as us, who refused to take action. And the Board of Water and Soil Resources and the Department of Natural Resources, all of which we've conferred with and support the approach. And then we've coordinated with legal counsel on how this fits into the rule. And then just this week, we confirmed receipt of the letter, acknowledged that we're going to be providing a response. I leaned in, took a phone call with the folks that were complaining. It was a 2-hour, 30-minute phone call. And then coming out of that, just committed to providing the board with the letter that we're transmitting to you, give you this briefing, outline the next steps. And then we'll follow up tomorrow with the folks that are complaining, the neighbors, in writing. And based on the phone call that we had this week, we said they would let me know what they think their next steps are. So a quick breakdown of our findings. Part of the concern outside of this berm is that there's been mass grading on the property and the whole property floodplain has been filled. We don't have any evidence to support that. We've been on site. We've looked at the LIDAR, which is the topography for both properties. And when you get out on site, both properties are essentially level. And so you would expect, based on the LIDAR, if there'd been fill, you would at least be able to see it. The mulch was essentially voluntarily removed, and the remaining berm in section 3 of our floodplain rule is essentially exempt. I don't even think the mulch should have necessarily had to have been removed, but in section 3 of our floodplain rule, we provide an exception for general landscaping so that we're not chasing down floodplain fill associated with landscaping berms. But mulch isn't written in there, soil and a bunch of other materials are, so our staff, very attuned to those details, requested the mulch to be removed. I think on assessment, there's no significant natural resource risk in terms of like the quantity of fill placed. It is an exception within the rule. We know this isn't going to impact the regional flood stage on Lake Minnetonka. There's no structural risk, and we've coordinated with all the partners who've supported the approach. So our next steps, unless the board wants to see something different at this point, is I'll issue this written response that we're drafting in coordination with legal to the neighbors. I'll make myself available to keep talking to them, which is what I told them this week, and offered for them to attend a future board meeting if they'd like to use the matters from the floor. These residents own property nearby but actually live in Canada, so they're not local. And so they said they might want to pick this issue back up in June when they're back in town or attend a meeting digitally. So it's kind of the brass tacks on 60 Crabapple Lane. And I've got one minor update after that, so I'll just pause to see if there's any questions.
I really appreciate how you got involved in this. Years back, we'd have a mob of neighbors in here yelling and accusing us of ignoring the problems and everything else. And interceding like you have, I think makes us look better, and certainly the neighbors feel a lot better that they got attention and they don't have to do a public protest. So thanks a lot.
Yep. I think the neighbors were happy with the response, but they're dissatisfied with the actions that I've outlined that we're taking. So just to make that clear. Okay. Thank you for that. And then finally, on the personnel front, we have James McDermott Spies. I had mentioned he would be joining us. He has joined us from Red Rock, a subsidiary of Minnesota Native Landscapes, on Tuesday. So this is third day, he's gonna waive. I said he would come to this first board meeting at his own risk, so he's in the audience auditing tonight's meeting, he's gonna wait to do his sort of formal introduction when we have our next committee meeting on February 13th. And he's working really hard, kind of picking up where I left off on updating our package to request quotes for vegetation management across our 30 sites. And obviously that's in his wheelhouse. He's got a lot of background there. So he's hoping to bring that forward in February and get an early action or win under his belt. So we'll see how that goes. And that's it for the administrator's report.
So are there 3 Jameses on staff?
We haven't, I'm slowly building an army. It's the only hiring criteria now is to be called
I
James.
think when I first came on the board, we had 3 Erics. That was interesting.
Maybe
Yeah.
we could call you Jim or Jim.
I was here first.
Jimbo.
Okay. Anything else for James? No?
Whisker.
All right then. I'm sorry?
Whisker. James
For
Whisker.
Mr. Whisker, yes. I wasn't confused. And as we go to the next item, I expect that we're moving into closed session, so I certainly give every staff my blessing to get on with their lives.
Yeah.
Which is nicer than saying, please leave the room.
Yeah.
Is Jay will be on with this?
Yep.
Okay, right.
Jay's woke up feeling quite under the weather today, so he's joining digitally, but he's here.
Hope you're feeling better, Jay.
Thank you, President, members, I knew that you didn't want my job.
I'm having trouble hearing
It's
you.
true.
He knows we don't want his germs.
Okay.
He's right.
If we're having troubles hearing too, we can adjust the volume if need be. Good evening, good morning. Good evening, Madam Chair and Manager. We're before you this evening, again, to continue discussions surrounding the negotiation of buildable land at 325 Blake Road, and as such would recommend the board advance into closed session. If it so chooses, Louis Smith can lead you in that process.
Mr. Smith?
President, we would recommend that the board managers go into closed session for the purpose of considering the expiration or possible revision of the purchase and sale agreement for 325 Lake Road in Hopkins.
Thank you. Is there a motion to that
So-
effect? Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sandler seconds. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in closed session. I have a motion to go out of closed session.
Yeah.
From Bill, second from Jean. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting's adjourned.